thank you very much for being here for November's UX UI Allies call. So that's user experience, user interface design, and accessibility within Power Platform. We've got 3 presenters today, which is a change from our usual. We usually have 2 people. So yeah, looking forward to this. I'm just going to go over some ground rules, as we always do, just so that everyone's aware of what to expect and if there are any issues, what you should do. So we follow the Microsoft Code of Conduct because we're a Microsoft user group. And yeah, you can feel free to take a screenshot of what's in front of you there if you'd like to. Feel free to contact us if you've got any issues, and we'll just go through some more ground rules that will help to make this more simple to digest. So basically, we expect everyone to be welcoming, respectful, and considerate of others. Feel free to express your viewpoints, but please consider that other people might have a difference of opinion, and not to be aggressive, to be friendly towards other people's differences of opinion. Feel free to ask questions. The speakers will usually say if they're happy for the questions to be asked during the presentation or if they prefer for them to be afterwards. You can use the chat feature. We have a Q&A feature. You can also raise your hand. And yeah, on the last point there, let us know what you want to hear more about. Are you interested in a particular topic and we haven't covered it yet and you want us to get people to speak about it? Just let us know. Some housekeeping rules, we're recording it. So if you do turn on your camera, if you do speak, it's going to be recorded. We'll be uploading this to YouTube. So if you don't want those things to happen, then just keep your camera off and don't speak. Feel free to chat and that won't be in the recording. But it's nice if everyone does turn on their cameras because then we can see who we're talking to and it feels like more of a community. It's also great for networking. People are more likely to remember your face. Feel free to use the meeting reactions. So if there's something you really enjoy or if you want to applaud at the end of the presentation, that kind of thing, go ahead and do those. And yeah, call for speakers. So we're always up for having more speakers on the topics that I mentioned beforehand. So we have a QR code there, which you can scan with your mobile phone. I'll get the link actually, and I'll put that into the chat, unless Anya's going to beat me to it. But,
I will sort it, Charlie, don't worry.
Oh, that's okay, just on it. But yeah, please feel free to submit. We will be going through all of the submissions periodically and trying to find slots for people where it makes sense. Of course, bear in mind this is user experience, user interface, and accessibility, and we expect topics on those particular things. So on to the way more interesting part, which is the presenters. So the presentations we've got today, we've got Josh starting off, then we've got Stuart, then we've got Charlie. We're covering a host of different things today, and it's going to be very interesting. So I'm looking forward to it. So I'm just going to say, Josh, take it away.
Thank you very much. I will do my best to keep everyone entertained for however long it is I've got.
You've got 25 minutes-ish.
Awesome.
Yeah, give or take 5 minutes.
So, okay. Well, let's start by sharing my screen. That's the first challenge. I'm just going to minimize that and expand that. And hopefully someone's going to say yes or nod. Lots of nodding. That's good. Perfect. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about extending modern controls in Power Apps, building Fluent to experiences. So it might not make much sense to those of you that aren't Power Appy, Canvas Appy people just now, but hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a good understanding of kind of what my angle is on this. So buckle up and hopefully it won't be too boring. So quick agenda, say 25 minutes-ish. If I go over that, anyone just shout, by the way. I'm happy just to be cut off. But the agenda roughly is going to be just discussing what the principles are in Fluent 2, kind of what it is, what modern controls are, what their strengths and gaps are, how we can extend them, and some best practices and tips, because we all like that sort of thing. And then just some key takeaways and a little bit of Q&A at the end if we have enough time. Feel free just to jump in with any questions. I might not see you on the screen, so someone can just shout and just let me know. That'd be great. Who am I? I'm Josh. I am a senior solution designer at Virgin Money. Still trying to figure out what that actually means in reality. But I sit within our Business Application Center of Excellence alongside a whole bunch of other people to kind of help with Power Platform and Dynamics assurance and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting role. I'm a Lego enthusiast. I love all things kind of camper van-y. Currently kind of renovating my camper van that I've got. Also a bit of started at the start of this year doing Couch to 5K, so I guess I'm a runner now, which is cool. And also along with Charles, run Power Squared on YouTube, so check that out if you haven't already. And there's a QR code on the screen if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn. And check out my blog. I do have a blog as well, but I don't post as much now. So what is Fluent 2? Let's give a quick overview. So it's a design language, right? So anything we see in Microsoft is following a design language. Microsoft's got a very distinct look and feel. That distinct look and feel is Fluent 2, kind of formerly known as Fluent V9. The idea behind it is that it's a consistent user kind of interface, user experience. It's accessible out the gate, so shouldn't be too much hassle with any of the accessibility side of things. It's modern, it looks nice, and marketing speak, it's delightful, right? It just feels nice compared to some of the older design styles. And you can see some images of kind of what that looks like. I'll bring up the website in a bit, and we can just run through kind of what stuff's there. But yeah, just some examples of Fluent 2 is, you'll see this in SharePoint, you'll see it in, Teams, you'll see it across the board with Microsoft applications. That is the Fluent 2 design language. We've just got some components there. So what are the kind of design principles behind Fluent 2? And, I appreciate some of this stuff is maybe a bit wishy-washy, but hopefully when we get into a bit of a demo in a minute, this will give a bit more kind of clarity and consistency to kind of what I'm trying to convey. So yeah, it's all about consistency in the design. So everything should feel and look like it's part of the one thing. So, the colors are very complementary. The typography is very specific. It's just a very consistent design language. It's accessible. I've already mentioned that, but things like contrast, focus order, it's all there kind of out of the box in the Fluent 2 design kind of principles. Bear in mind, I'm talking about Fluent 2 in specific and not modern controls, because there are some caveats around that in modern controls, so just keep that in mind. It's all about depth, motion. There's the kind of fade in, fade out kind of layering around the Fluent 2 that gives it a little bit more kind of pop and buzz than maybe a different design language. And it's responsive, right? So it works across devices. It should just respond to any device you're on, which makes it feel and act a bit nicer. So let's talk about modern controls. So for those of you that don't know, have been hiding under a rock or in a cave or something the past 2 years, modern controls are the kind of Power Apps, Canvas apps iteration of Fluent 2. So they're what you see when you fire up a Canvas app. You will see the modern controls. I don't think you have to turn them on anymore. They're just there, kind of taking over what we do inside Canvas apps. So there's some strengths and there's some gaps, right, with modern controls. If you haven't experienced them, I'm sure you'll kind of get to a point where you'll find out what those limitations are with them, right? Because there are, particularly compared to some of the classic controls, there's some limitations, but some of the strengths, right? I've already talked about this, but the accessibility, they've got the kind of keyboard focus states, which is quite nice. You don't have to worry about tab orders as much as you used to with classic controls. These controls are built responsiveness out of the box, so you can kind of, work with them across devices. If you've used the table control, you kind of see that with the kind of reflow settings. Well, that is in preview, but it's a good example of that. They're quite performant. Some people might debate that, but on the whole, they are fairly performant. And they are quite easy to use, right? Probably just due to lack of configurability, but they are quite easy to use to get going. So what's some gaps in with the modern controls? We don't have a navigation menu. There's no native navigation menu control yet. Whether that will come, we don't know. There's some missing compound controls, such as your command bar. Although there is one now in preview, fairly similar to a command bar. I'm sure someone can chime in and tell me what that's called, because it's completely gone out of my head. But things like navigation menu, breadcrumbs, cards, all of these kind of controls that are in the Fluent 2 design language, and we'll have a look at that full list, just aren't there. Limited customization, I've already talked about that. And limited theming as well. Although we've got that new theming kind of designer in Canvas apps, it's still not as kind of configurable in terms of theming as the classic controls were. So something to keep in mind there. So when we talk about extending modern controls, kind of this kind of like stupid little waterfall diagramming thing hopefully kind of gives you a bit of an idea of kind of what that kind of flow looks like, right? So you start off with that Fluent 2 design language, which we've got there in the Microsoft world. They're brought over as modern controls, not in their entirety, into Power Apps. And then we've got to think about, well, where those gaps exist, let's think about extensions and go from there. So that's where this kind of like modern controls plus kind of concept that I'm coining kind of comes in. So yeah, the modern controls are foundations, but extensions are going to bring that to life and give you some kind of jazz on your apps. So we look at that first example again. I've mentioned this a couple of times now. Navigation. It's just nice to have a really consistent navigation experience compared to something that's just looks completely jarring and not like Fluent at all. So we'll go over that. And being able to build something like that parent-child menu, which often catches people out, particularly when we're talking about things like galleries and Canvas apps, being able to collapse and expand those items as well. How to do active state highlighting and data-driven as well, aka it's easy to update, add new or remove menu item, change names or whatever we need to do on that, we can do it. And we've got breadcrumbs, so a bit of a kind of modern breadcrumb spin, being able to help users a hierarchy, that secondary navigation aspect. You see it in SharePoint, you see it across Microsoft kind of products. Being able to use an auto width gallery, kind of, we'll go into that as well, and kind of how to achieve that, and obviously how to customize and extend it. Another example is a card. So, again, cards all over the place in Microsoft, but we don't have them in Canvas apps out of the box. So it's just a nice component to build. Yeah, and then some performance maintainability tips. Appreciate I'm kind of buzzing through this, but I'd much rather demo with the limited time that I have. So if I'm going too fast, I can share this slide deck post this call. Yeah. If we're building or wanted to extend modern controls, use a component-based design. It just means that we're going to be a bit more performant and keep things a lot more easier to maintain. Maximize control flexibility of properties. What do I mean by that? So using the component-based design, we can inject properties into that. So we've got input, output, state properties to make things a lot more easier to deal with. Where we can and where we, what we need to do is use collections and galleries to reduce control count, particularly if we're talking about repeatable sections. This is going to help, again, with performance. Template. It's a mantra of mine, really, when we're talking about building things like Canvas apps, which are just overly onerous to develop, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. So if we can template and standardize our designs, it's gonna mean that we can kind of realize what we're trying to do a lot more quicker than doing everything by scratch. Lastly, one that's overlooked by probably everyone, right, is documentation. Keep it up to date, whether you've got an internal Confluence or a SharePoint site or a GitHub. Just keep it up to date with what you do so that you don't kind of forget going forward. And if someone else takes over from you, they don't look at your code and go like, what is going on here? But what about AI with all of this, right? Because we're talking about Canvas apps, there's loads of fun things we can do manually, but AI is the talk of the town. What do we do with that? Where does that come into play? And the way I see this is AI can generate the app, but it's not going to give you that kind of level of detail, flexibility, and intuitiveness that, a human touch is going to provide. I know there's kind of some newer things out there that can, but particularly in the Canvas app world, maybe not so much. And also having that kind of final human touch as well, it does provide a bit of kind of trust, clarity, and helps with adoption rather than just letting a robot do it all. So there's still a need for a developer in today's world, in my mind. But again, happy to debate that with anyone. And yeah, we're adhering to Fluent 2 principles as well here, so it keeps AI-driven apps consistent and accessible. And yeah, AI plus great UI equals accelerated productivity. So the two complement each other. We're not trying to kind of outdo each other, in my mind. So what are some key takeaways on this before I jump into the demo? So yeah, it's not just a design language and experience, as Microsoft speaks, so take from that what you will. But modern controls are a starting point. They serve as a foundation for design, and they simplify experiences. It prioritizes accessibility and performance, so we don't have to worry about it, but you probably have to it doesn't have to affect your developer workflow as much, so it kind of aids with that. You need to extend them for maximum flexibility. If you don't, you're just going to get these kind of limitations because you don't have the controls, and it's just going to become a bit of a pain to use them. And yeah, create reusable components. It's going to make it a lot easier to deal with. So before I jump into that, I'm going to quickly jump into demo. How long have I got left?
You've got plenty of time.
Okay, cool.
You'll be fine.
So I'm going to jump into this component library that I've developed called Modern Controls Plus. I'm not going to show everything here because, yeah, full transparency, this is still a work in progress of mine, but it's quite nice to showcase kind of like what my thought process is around this stuff. So this is a component library that I've done. There's a number of controls here just to address some gaps that I feel that the modern controls kind of have. So I'm going to showcase kind of some of that very briefly. But what I just want to showcase before I do that, I should have done this first actually, is the Fluent 2 design language, right? You can get to it by going to fluent2.microsoft.design, and you're going to get this page here. It's going to tell you all about the Fluent 2 design language, what it is. But it's all geared for the kind of pro coder, the kind of mainstream developer, rather than the low coder power apper person, right? So just keep that in mind, but we can take inspiration from here. What I really like about it, and if you want some bedtime reading, do check out all of this stuff here. It's kind of how it comes about, how to use it, that kind of thing. But I really like this components tab because look at all these components that we get, or Fluent 2 gives us, right? Imagine if Canvas apps gave us that. How cool would that be? One of the things that kind of bugs me is around the text field. I'll just showcase that. So, text in Fluent 2 is a standard thing. Sorry, I don't mean text, I mean input. It's just a standard thing. But there's not a lot of configurability in Canvas apps when we add a text input. But if we look at the field control in Fluent 2, there's so much we can do with it, right? We can add validation messages, we can add validation states. I know we can do that in the box and some of this stuff, but there's some really cool things that we can do, like placeholders, tooltips, icons. This kind of thing is really cool, in my opinion, and kind of elevates that user experience. So it's one of those things I thought, well, why not build something similar as a component, and it will kind of work a bit better and be a bit more consistent. So that was one of the ones that I'll showcase. And then obviously we've talked about the nav menu, right? But it's fairly nice, the Microsoft Fluent 2 nav menu. It's got expanding menus, sub-menus, icons, active states. I've talked about all of this, but yeah, take a look. There's so many cool things here that you can kind of look at and get inspiration from. Even daft things like toasts and dividers, right? It's loads of things to use. But if we look at this here, back to my component library. So here's that field I was talking about. I'm just going to move this over. And what's really nice about this is just the sheer amount of configurability of this component, right? So you can do things like placeholders. You've got accessible labels, different modes. So if you want to do it as a multi-line, you can do that, or a single line. You want to make it text or search or password. I still don't know what that search one does actually is in the modern controls. If anyone knows, let me know. Things like display mode. Of course, you've got to reconfigure some of these such as standard properties as a component, but it's quite good because you've just got more flexibility on some of these things, right? Let me zoom in case no one can see that. There you go, that's better. Things that I think add value to this are things like the validation message at the bottom and the validation state. We've got, I think it's 3, so if we do none, it will go away. If you go error, it will show, sorry, error. And if we go I think it's a success. Should have checked this before the call. There we go. Cool. It will show a nice success one. So really cool things. Some limitations in component libraries, though, is you can use enum values. aka I can't just make these things drop downs, which would be lovely. I'd make it a lot more nicer for people to do, rather than having to, type what it is, the property they want is. But most of these, of course, I've chosen the one that I haven't done. Most of these are commented with code. So things like icons as well. So you can decide if you want an icon before, after, if you want hint text, what the label size is, what the font weight is, all these really cool things, if you want the label visible or not. Some really nice things, right? And what I quite like as well is just a really kind of quick thing, is the required kind of asterisk. Again, I don't particularly agree with required asterisks in the design language. I prefer the option and brackets. It just makes it clearer what it is. But Microsoft like to use asterisks. That's not an out-of-the-box thing, but I've made this so that if you make this required, the asterisk will appear. If I go false, it will disappear. So, some really nice configurability here, which is nice. Looking at nav next. So this is a full-blown nav component that I've created. It's expandable, collapsible. It's a little bit slow here, but it is quicker when you actually put it in an app. What I really like about this, though, is when we talk about things like nested navigation menus, is a lot of this stuff uses sub galleries or galleries within a gallery. I hate that. It's not performant. It's not nice. So this is actually using a bit complex, but quite nice in that it's using things like child IDs and IDs to achieve that instead. So when you select a parent item, it's then going to showcase all the child items if there are any. I'll show you this in the app because this is showing everything as active state, just because the way it is in the component. But again, really configurable. You can change things like the logo, whether there should be a drawer at the bottom, what should happen when you click the icons, that kind of thing. It's really nice. Nice value add to the already nice modern controls. Another one I'll showcase quickly is date range. So if you've ever gone on to like booking.com, for example, when you go and select where you want to stay, you get your dates, you get a lovely date range calendar. We don't get that in Power Apps. So I thought, well, actually, that's quite a good challenge to have a look at and see if I can achieve something similar. And two, it's just nice, if you've done things like leave calendars or you want someone to select multiple dates rather than having two date pickers, just use a date range instead. And this is nice because one, you've got your initial date. So, if we choose the 24th, for example, or the 25th, we can select our date ranges. If we've got, you notice here, there's some grayed out things too. That means that you can't select them. All that is because there's a custom property called booked dates. Effectively, my thinking is if you've got, say, holidays booked, you wouldn't want to be able to select them again. So let's say, I've got the 14th to the 17th off on annual leave. Actually, I want to take the 12th to the 18th instead. I can just select that, and then it's going to add those 3 days as well. And what's nice about this as well is it calculates working days. So, you don't have to faff around, what about the Saturday and the Sunday? It automatically realizes also into account that these days are booked as well, that there's only 3 days that I've selected. So it's really nice. Breadcrumb as well. I was going to showcase this in more detail, but I can't because none of my properties saved when I was building this. But Giles, this is one of your specialties, so no credit for me here. This is credit to you because you helped me with this. So basically, the idea being is that you can configure this to be an auto width effective gallery based on some custom code in your horizontal gallery. So it does work. You just have to take my word for it today. So yeah, there's a couple there. So bringing all this together, I won't show too many more, but bringing all this together, right? It's all great having all this stuff, but template and app, right? So if we look at this example here that I've created, I always like to start with something. Ignore that delegation warning. That's just bad developer stuff. So slap wrist for me. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. I think that's a saying. Someone correct me there. But anyway, yes, this is really nice because if we start with something kind of baseline, it means we can kind of create these experiences. So what I've done here is I've just created a kind of baseline screen, right? And this screen just then allows me to drop in any of my components, like my cards, which is auto width as well, by the way. And none of these are PCF, might add. These are all canvas components. So that's probably your next level up is the PCFs. But everything's kind of out of the box with your components. It's all looking good. But to build this takes mere minutes then rather than hours, because you've got a templated app. So here's your your nav menu in action. Now we'll expand that, click upcoming events. There's our kind of drop down. If I go into events, we can then see obviously the events that are coming up. Caveat to this is a gallery. You can't create gallery components, so this has to be hard coded effectively, but you can still make it match the kind of look and feel of what you're trying to achieve. And this kind of template, I know I've just banged on about Fluent 2 for a while, but it's a bit of a hybrid away from Fluent 2, right? But it has a nice kind of inspiration around it and kind of adds value to it, in my opinion, rather than going full-blown Microsoft Fluent 2. But things like the search bar here is just my input control. Again, you can see it there. It's just a search one. I've created a placeholder. I've added an icon for search before. And, you're off to the races with this. You're not having to kind of create a control that's got, and if you look here, actually, the input, right? How many controls are part of that one component? If you added that every single time, what a slowdown that's going to create for your app, right? So having it as a component just makes everyone's life easier. And yeah, that's a kind of general theme behind it. If we look at formulas on the app, we've got our menu items being fed in, and you can see here all we're doing is we're feeding through what the active screen is, what the icon is, and the icon's using the modern control icons, right? So that's really nice about that is when I select an icon, it makes it filled. Just kind of small details like that kind of, I think, in my opinion, kind of make a good app from a great app. So some things to consider. And then lastly, we'll look at the kind of fields here, and I just want to showcase this really quickly. How am I doing for time? Have I got a couple of minutes?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, awesome. It's just how easy it is for these controls to kind of be dropped into here. So, if I want to add a divider, all I can do is go into my component library, add my divider in, just turn off my controls. I don't want any text. I'll just turn that off. I'll turn the inset off, and I'll just make that 500. I'll just make that slightly higher as well, just to give a bit of padding. And then I'll just add another, let's add a number input. And things like now, all I need to do here, and I'm not going to add a number input, it's a bad example, add the text input. I can just say, actually, I want the input width to be 500. Do I want a label? Yes, I'll make the label visible. And we'll just, don't want a placeholder, just delete that. I want this to be multi-line, so I'll just change that to multi-line instead. What's that not working? Don't know. Okay, bad thing to demo. We'll just keep it a single line. It does work usually. Input height, we can just change that to 50. Everything's here, but I don't want my where is it? I don't need hint text. Don't any validation either. So just turn that off. But what's good is you can control these states, right? Like the validation states through like your submit button. So you could have everything, looking good, but you hit submit, and then you control that via a context variable that's then going to flash up a validation message. So that's where the value in this stuff comes, is just making it really, really configurable and easy to do. So hopefully that's been useful. I'm going to just bring up my presentation again. And yeah, so like building your own Fluent 2 experiences, this stuff isn't hard. You just kind of have to kind of dive in with it. So for me, just experimenting, just being curious, that's kind of the kind of key kind of initiator for me. Learning using these resources, the Fluent 2 website that I showed. Again, they've got a concept, kind of React guidance as well, which you can use, and using the component library and modern controls references in Microsoft Learn too. And then also, sharing your work, LinkedIn, GitHub, samples gallery, that's the stuff that I've shown. I do hope to kind of make available on samples and GitHub at some point. So if you are interested, let me know. I'll be more than happy to share. I don't know if we've got time for Q&A, but if there's any questions, do let me know. If not, thank you.
If anyone wants to ask a question or two, we can go with that. That was great to see, though. I love the style of it. And I think, like Charlie said in the comments, it's really slept on, people building component libraries and then having that available to an entire organization, because it does give that consistency, that professionalism. And yeah, the bit about end users being scared about another app, that is really important. It means that they then feel like it's familiar. So it's easy for them to pick up. It's less worry about needing to have user documentation and things like that. So yeah, love it.
Thank you.
All right, no hands up. So I think we just go ahead with Stuart. If you're ready, Stuart.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm ready.
Thank you.
I have no slides. This is purely going to be demo.
Fantastic.
But, yeah, just before we start on this one, just want to say thanks to Josh. That was a really cool session. Works really well coming into what I'm about to discuss as well. So I'm going to share my screen and talk you through why I'm here today and how we would achieve that. So today I'm here to talk to you about GDS. For anyone who caught my last session on this user group, we talked through the various different GDS things that are available. And today we are going to build a text area control, possibly do some extensions on it using modern controls that we just walked through a moment ago. So we're going to start with a very, very basic component library. And I've got here just a text area control with a container that's parent.width, parent.height, and removed all the silly stuff like the border and all that from it just to start off. But we're going to start with our out-of-the-box text control. We're going to go back to our container for a moment. And we're going to stretch. And we'll stick a gap of 5 on. And just like Josh went through a moment ago, we're going to add some properties. I like to call this one question. And that's going to be the thing we're asking. I'm going to add some more text stuff, which we'll go through in just a little moment. I'm going to do that. We're going to add that in there. We're going to add a third one. And we're going to add a text input. I promise this will all make sense in just a few minutes. We're then going to move this up by 1. And we're then going to go back to our properties here. We've got our question at the very top here. And we're then going to do exterior.question. Go back to our control. We then have our question here configured into that. Going to create another one for hint text. And we would, of course, put a proper description and so on, but in the interest of time today, we'll skip by that. And this is going to be I don't want to reload. And this one, this time round, we're going to want an output property. And in our output property, we're going to do something slightly different here. That's going to be text input canvas 1. Dot value. For hint text here. And we are also going to do one more input property. Error. And we shall also add this part. So we're very quickly there put together. Question, some placeholder hint text, text input, and an error message. These are all, as you probably noticed, your standard out-of-the-box modern controls. So we're now going to look at some of the modern controls properties to make it look and feel a bit more like this. Let's just recapping here. Question, hint text, input. There is no error on this one, that's on a separate control. But that would just look something like this. So we're going to pop back to here, and we are going to have our hint text. We take our modern control here, the modern text input, and there's a few properties that we want to look through. We're going to start with multi-line. We're then going to look at our height, default height being 32. I'm going to go 96 because I want it 3 times the height. We could do flexible height if we wanted, but what that's then going to end up is potentially a massive control on the screen that's kind of a bit distracting for people. So I tend to go 96, 3 lines basically. We can then go through and we can go outline, which removes that grey background. We can find our border. We can set maybe a 1-point border, maybe even higher. Set our border radius to 0. So we end up with a square. And we can perhaps even set that a wee bit higher, maybe even do 3 points. Make that bit wider. And all of a sudden, we've gone from the standard out-of-the-box Fluent experience that's really well aligned to a Microsoft application to that little bit closer to a GDS-style application that's used in public sector in the UK. They're quite prescriptive about this. So although Fluent tends to be our preferred go-to, when it comes to government work, they tend to be a bit more, no, you have to follow our standard. We're then going to go back to our question here. Standard text control, we're going to go through some of the properties on this. We're going to keep the height as it is for now. We can make it bold. We can make it bigger. We can change our colour, for example, which will be down here. Make this grey. It's not going to look like much of a change because it's tiny there. Again, we could pop this up a wee bit. Or we could even make it red, for example. Now, obviously, we don't want our error appearing all the time. We can take our visible, and we can take text area dot validation state. Now, you could make this a true false if you wanted. As we're using other modern controls, I tend to prefer making it error. That's where everything else is set up as well. I've never understood why Microsoft didn't have that as a boolean. They have it as 2 text values instead, but they do. So here we are. And in just over 10 minutes, we've got a very basic text area control. Now, a few things I like to do with these controls as well to make them a little bit more refined, ignoring the fact that we've got silly naming conventions on the left. We will fix that in a minute. It's to alter the height of this to be, excuse me, I will try it again. We'll alter the height of this container here to not be parent.height, to instead be, you know what, I'm going to rename these first actually, because it's annoying me now. Done there. There are various different naming conventions out there for how you might name your controls. I'm not going to get into discussion about which one's preferred, which one you should go with. Stick with whatever naming convention you've got within your organization. We quite often see like TXT underscore, all sorts of different combinations. I'm going to go with just a blanket one here just to give us an easier way of understanding what we're putting in here. So when we pop back to our container, we're going to take text question, dot height. We're going to add text hint, dot height. Input answer, dot height. And we're going to add text error, dot height, plus text.layout gap times 6. Sorry. It's 4. So that's going to give us that little bit of space at the bottom. You could reduce that if you want. You could put it down to 3. You could even put it down to 2 if you want. I like to have that wee bit of extra space there. What we can also do as well with this is we can extend this to be along the lines of text error.visible. Again. And what that's going to do is if text error is not visible, don't show it. If it is visible, show it. Need to put this up to 5. So the reason that's 5 is we've got 4 controls plus a space at the bottom, basically. So we've got into our very, very, very basic text input. Sorry, no, we haven't. We've got into our very, very basic text area. Looks just like this. Through our component there, we can use our properties to create some very, very basic stuff. Josh took this a whole lot further than I did a moment ago there. There's a few other bits that I like to add in as well. So we've got our character count. This is one of my favourite things to include. As we type, we get the character amount dropping. So let's have a look at how we can implement that. So we're going to insert another text. And we're going to call this text count. We're then going back to our container. It will take text count dot height, and we'll increment this 5 at the end by 6 because we now have 6 controls here. We can take text count, very, very basic property change here. We'll make that bold. We can then do when we want not text. So I'm going to do this in a few different stages here just to show you how this is all working. So we start off with our length formula there that gives you the length of what we've got. Then I'm going to take, just for now to show you a few other bits and pieces that are worth having as well in here, we are going to take a maximum length. Now we can achieve that through using like recordsource.info or something along those lines. I'm going to set in here another property, input property for max length. And we're going to make this a number. And we can do this in two different ways. Some people prefer to have how many you've put in. A lot of people prefer to have how many you've got left. So if we take a simple, are you being weird? X area.max length minus that. It's not how you spell characters or how you spell the meaning. And we'll stick our 2 ampersands in here, or you could use string interpolation, or sorry, 1 ampersand and string interpolation, or you can do all sorts of different ways there. Now I'd like to extend this a little bit further again. And if we do, I'm going to fix this spelling first because it's doing my head and looking at it. So we've got down here 100 characters remaining, which is all fine. Here we have a problem though. It's going to insert the component for now and show you how this may come through here. So we're going custom components, text area. We'll get rid of that. Not sure why that's being weird. Right, this way. Sorry, bear with me. What's going on with Canvas apps today? Ah, wait a minute. We can stick play in here. This is reducing. Keep reducing. Very specific sweet spot that I'm looking for here. This is still accurate here that we've got 14 characters remaining. 3, 2, 1. 1 characters remaining is not English. There should be no S on the end. So we can achieve something really simple like that by doing text area max length 100 minus that. It's not liking that, is it?
Just the double quotes after the character, I think.
Ah, double quotes here.
Halfway through your line where you've got a character. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
And we want greater than 1, sorry, not 1. We then pop back here, we've got 1 character remaining. This is all working quite well so far. We haven't run out of time yet, which is always good. We then want to extend this a little bit further by looking at our remaining. Ignore my terrible spelling today. And we're going to bring this down a bit because there's something wrong here. The end of an F. That was something along these lines. We've got 1 character remaining. And tweak this a wee bit. And we're now saying we've got too many. We can do a little bit of tweaking to this. Take -1. That needs to be the opposite way around. This bracket's in the wrong place. That one goes in there. It really doesn't like that. We'll try that again. I don't know why that's not. But because we had half a formula in there. Yeah, it's really not enjoying this, but we can mess around with our formula here and add various different kinds of if statements and things in here to tell you how many characters you've got, how many are remaining, etc. And we can lastly take a very, very basic property that's within pretty much every control. And we can take our length. We can put a bracket in the correct place. That's probably what's wrong there. Then what this is going to do is when we reach our negative numbers, it's going to give us red. Now we are very, very close to time, and I am conscious that we do have another session to do this evening. I appreciate that was a bit jumping all over the place there, but just to recap what we've gone through so far before we hand over to Charlie for the last session, we've taken modern controls. We've built up a very, very basic component, including a question, some hint text, the answer, an error that will display based on an error state or a validation state rather, we've built a quick text count. We've had a look at how we might work with that text count to include the letter S at the end or not include it, how we might make it red when we're over our character limit, and we made a stab at having it show too many or left at the end. Didn't quite achieve that final bit of sorting out the minus. I'm fairly sure that that's the calculations the wrong way around and we can fix that fairly easily. But that was a quick demonstration of how you might use modern controls and components with input and output properties to create a really nice, really reusable control. Like Josh had a moment ago, a component library. I've got a fully fledged one I built for the Ministry of Defence recently, and they are now using that to throw together Canvas apps with next to no experience, so proper citizen developer people, in a matter of about 10 or 15 minutes. And that's the end of my session. Do we have any questions?
No questions at the moment.
Thank you very much. If there's
Thanks
no
very much,
questions,
Stuart.
I'll hand you over to Charlie.
From one Charlie to another. Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you. I'm not sure how I follow on from that, but let me share my screen and then I'll set the scene. So if you can just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yep,
Perfect.
looks great.
So I had to pitch hard to come and present this presentation at this user group. But I've taken a very different approach. So let me explain why I think it's still relevant for this group. With apps and AI, this buzzword, we can improve user experience. And this group's all about user experience. So I want to show how I'm using AI to enhance user experience inside a Canvas app and ultimately save people time on input fields. The other reason I think it's relevant is accessibility can mean many things, but I also believe that AI is accessible to all of us. We just don't know what's available to us as low-code developers, as system developers. But essentially, if you can write natural language, if you can write a sentence, you can start using AI out the box. So that's what I'm here to show today. I'm not going to... There's one demo that I'll show of a pro code, but I'm not going to even dig into the pro code element, just show you it for the end-to-end demo. So think about user experience and think about AI and it being accessible to you throughout this. So with that, I'll kickstart. The title for my session is How to Achieve Document Extraction with Low-Code Out-of-the-Box AI. I'm going to do a live demo, so please pray that the live demo gods are with us. Now, I've chosen a business use case that should resonate with all of us, right? I've kept it very generic, so you can go away and think about how you could do something similar in your business. So my only ask, or as Donna likes to say, homework, is think big. So what I show you today, just think how you can reuse this within inside your organizations and for your purpose. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Charlie Phipps-Bennett, 3 times BizApps MVP and Apps and Automate Global Director at Synapse. So if my keyboard worked, I would move to next slide. Just going to start with a quick agenda. So as I said, I'm going to walk through the business case. We're going to go directly into the sort of demo, talk about the benefits of this, and then we'll get under the hood. Once you've seen how it works, once you've seen it live, I'll show you how it actually works. Then I'll talk a little bit about some tips and tricks that I've got when it comes to prompt writing, and then also when and why you would need to involve experts sometimes. So you'll get so far on your own, and then there's sometimes when you're building sort of enterprise grade applications where you might need to lean on people. And then we can end with a Q&A. So just to set the scene with business case, I'm trying to keep the slides very basic. So think of purchase orders landing in your inbox. Now, usually, typically, purchase orders land in mailbox, whether that's a shared mailbox across a sales team or whether that's many individual salespeople, suppliers are sending purchase orders or invoices. That can be in PDF format, that can be in Word format. Now, what happens is people manually have to download these. The salesperson in this scenario has to manually download this and then input it into a CRM or go for approval. So can I approve this purchase order? So there is someone manually extracting this data and then putting it into a system. it's a typical scenario. So data is manually extracted, in this case added to our CRM, and then we send the purchase order approval for email. Now, the current issue with a typical business use case like this is there are multiple purchase orders being sent via email. How do we know what's being processed, who it's being processed by? I've seen a lot of people using workarounds like flagging, categorizing in Outlook, but Outlook isn't a task tracker. It doesn't have full audit capabilities. So really, I say it has a lack of centralized tracking and visibility. So we'll look at how we solve that. There's no clear mechanism to monitor which purchase orders being processed. Are they in process? Have they been processed? Have they been paid, submitted, etc.? So this can usually cause missed orders or delays. You see that quite often, especially for large organizations. It's okay if you're getting sort of 1-2 purchase orders a day or even a week, but I work with organizations where it's 10,000 purchase orders being processed a month. So that volume, you can imagine where it can get complex. So I mentioned sort of lack of audit trail. Staff must manually extract information. That's tedious. None of us should be copying and pasting data. That's a waste of our time and a waste of our skill sets. So I really try and avoid that. And that's where we're going to use AI today in Canvas apps. And yeah, based on that, the overall process is labor intensive, inefficient, and there's sort of no real-time reporting on the statuses. So with that, enough slides. Let's just jump straight into the demo. So if I can sort out my screens. Now, for the purpose of this, I've used Gemini to create some purchase orders. Just why not use Gemini? I can use Copilot, I can use whatever. But for the purpose of this, I've got some dummy purchase orders. Because I'm a little bit crazy, I've sent them to myself. Now, this is where I said I have built a pro code element. I have built an application that sits within inside my Outlook. So that's my pro code. But this is just to give you what a user experience could look like end to end. So I've created this purchase order AI pilot. And essentially, this is very simple. All this allows me to do is view the attachments and submit an attachment. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to select invoice 2 and submit that. Now, what you can see is that will have submitted successfully. Come on, let me just double check. I had this open earlier, so there we go. Right, I can see. So what I can see from here is this has now already been processed. So I won't be able to select this again. I won't be able to process it. So these purchase orders, I can already see that I've already processed invoice 1 and invoice 2. So I've only got 2 remaining. Now, what's happening is this is storing this document. So just for our benefit, let's see what invoice 2 looked like. Invoice 2 is just a standard purchase order. We've got a chair, a monitor, and a delivery charge. We've got 5 chairs, we've got 2 monitors, and we've got VAT and a price. So what do we want from here? Not that screen. We want a Canvas app. So I'm just going to refresh this Canvas app. As you can see, it's in development. Now, this is the latest one. Here's one I did earlier. We're going to view this record. So for people who don't know Canvas app, again, just a basic Canvas app that I've built. Now, I can actually go into this record, and on the right-hand side, I've got the PDF. Full disclaimer, I don't use a PDF viewer currently in Canvas apps just because it's in preview. So I've got a custom PCF control, just something I prefer. But I've got my PDF viewer. So I've loaded in my PDF viewer. And already you can see that I've managed to use AI to pre-populate a lot of my fields. Now, why do I keep the human in the loop? I keep the human in the loop because even when I have a purchase order, there'll be things that I can't trust that AI always gets right. Or there's extra mandatory fields that I need to input and then put into my CRM. So a great example here is I'd want to input a required shipment date for these products. I'm not going to get that from the purchase order, but I'm going to know that from my system. So already I can see here quite clearly the user experience, what was able to be pulled from AI and what wasn't. I could then go in and fill out this data And only once I fill out all this data, I could then actually go in and approve. I've kept requirement and shipment date non-mandatory. I could then click approve, send out an approval if it needs to go to a senior. Imagine if I'm a junior, that could then go to Charles as my senior. He approved, automatically ingested my CRM. So quite quickly, I'm able to ingest data that's landed in my mailbox through to a Canvas app for a review and some human input, and then submit it to a third-party software of my choice. So if we just flick back to the slides, just to quickly go through the why. The benefits of this is I'm going to get a full audit trail, and I'll explain why I've got a full audit trail. I've now got AI-generated purchase orders in my CRM. Currently, I've got a review step in my Canvas app. I can have automated approvals off the back of this. I click approve and I have Teams integration for approvals. There's minimal manual data entry. So from there, you could see I had 5 or 6 fields that my AI wasn't able to extract. So rather than inserting 30 fields, I'm inserting 5 fields. So I've reduced the time, by 6. And I have full process oversight because, as you can see in my Outlook plugin, I can see what's processed and what's pending. And then from there, obviously, because I've now got all of this data, I could have reporting capabilities. So couple of things. I'll come back to the prompt engine. But before I do, let's look under the hood and see what we're actually dealing with. So to explain how this works, that Outlook plugin, as I said, is pro code. But after that step, it's all low code. So all that plugin does is take something from my mailbox, the attachment, and stores it in SharePoint. So if I go to my SharePoint, I can see that I have this invoice and it's landed. From there, I have a basic Power Automate flow. So this Power Automate flow, if we refresh this, just so you can see, we ran it 4 minutes ago. And what is that doing? That is monitoring my SharePoint. So my trigger is when a file is created. As you can see here, I've got some error handling, so try, catch, finally loops. Firstly, what do? I get the file metadata and I get the content of that file. Then, this is where the magic happens. I run a prompt. So what is run a prompt? It's an action. Now, I'm going to flick over to Power Automate to show you these. So on the left-hand side, if you go to more, you'll see prompts. I've got it here. If you've not used these are brilliant. There's multiple ways you can achieve this solution, by the way. I'm going to talk about all 5, but this is the best one out of the box low code. So you've got these prompts. Now, you've got pre-built popular prompts that you can use, but for the purpose of this demo, I created a custom. Now, this is my prompt on the left. Now, this window and this editor is beautiful. You can test in here and you can test what the response is. Now, I know what you're thinking, Charlie. You're really clever. Like, how did you write that? I wrote this prompt using Copilot. I'm not clever, right? I literally wrote what I want as a prompt, put it into here, and I've got all my fields extracted out my purchase order. Yes, it was iterative. Yes, I've got experience prompt writing, so I know how to structure my prompt. So there is a bit of my experience in here, but any of us can do this. It's writing prompts. We can then test. You have the option to choose the model that you want. So you've got some standard out of the box. The great thing now is these are more advanced, that you can actually use AI Foundry models. So this is making it much more advanced. You can actually select the type of output that you want. So in this scenario, I just want a JSON output, and then I pass the JSON and write to Dataverse, which I'll show you back in the flow. So in here, I could go test. It says I haven't uploaded a file. I could select the file to upload. So in this scenario, I could say, right, select invoice 3. Invoice 3 is uploaded. This is me as a developer now testing. This is showing me what my result will be. And then I can play with this prompt and iterate it to make it more effective to my invoice. Now, I know what some people are thinking, well, why don't you just use AI Builder, train it against, a specific template? This scenario is where you might have 100 suppliers. Are you really going to train against 100 different templates? And these templates could change over time? No. So this is where prompt engineering is key. And this is where it helps. So straight away, you can see from my prompt, I can test, I can upload, and I can see the type of JSON output I'm getting. So all written in natural language. So if we flick back over to the Power Automate, the Power Automate flow is then giving me these values back. So I can then start seeing the outputs, and I can do something with these outputs. So because I get that in a JSON format, it passes it back. I'm then simply adding this to Dataverse. So you can add it to whatever data source of your choice. I've chosen Dataverse in this case because my Canvas has on top of my Dataverse. So automatically, I've been able to use prompting to extract out of the PDF that's landed in my SharePoint and then add to Dataverse and have a Canvas app sit on top of it. So pretty cool because, as I say, I'm minimizing the effort that I have to put in to input. So just cautious of time, and I'm flicking through this fast. I just want to touch upon the things that I think are important. So I'm just going to flip back to prompt writing. Now, as I said, I used Copilot to do the prompt writing. However, I've got experience with doing a lot of prompt writing now, and this is sort of my tips and tricks. So play with the structure of your prompt. I'm quite clear with my instructions. I lay them out quite precisely. So if I go back to my prompt, I've actually labeled my instructions. This is the first thing you're going to do. This is the second thing you're going to do. This is the third thing. I treat my prompts as if I was teaching a child to do something. If I'm teaching a child how to walk, how would I train it? Or how to tie your shoelace? What am I going to tell it? I'm going to give it some really clear instructions. So I'm giving this very clear instructions and thinking about the format. So I label what's instructions, and then I give a clear understanding of the title and then the steps involved. Flick back to the slide. Sorry, I know I'm flicking in between. Iterate and regenerate. So the great thing about this prompting window is you can test directly in there. So you don't have to keep testing end to end. I can keep uploading a file saying, okay, now I want to change that because it didn't get the email address. Maybe I need to write how to get the email address. If it's not an email address, can I get a contact number? I'm expecting some kind of contact detail on this purchase order. So I'm reiterating to kind of better my response. I mentioned the clear instructions, defining the output. So in this case, I defined that I wanted JSON. There's different output types you can have: document, text, string, JSON, you name it. And then where possible, include examples. In some scenarios, I'll include examples of what I want the output to look like. In this case, I didn't on this prompt because I didn't need it. I got the output that I wanted. But that's another good scenario where I've done it. I've helped guide agents. And this is just prompt writing in general, right? This isn't just for the Automate, but in general, I've provided examples of what I'm expecting as an output to aid the agent. So I mentioned why to involve people. Now, there's 5 ways I could have done this. I just demoed the Power Automate prompts. I've previously demoed autonomous agents using Copilot Studios. So you can do this using Copilot Studios and retrieving back from tools in Copilot Studio. You could use AI Builder. Again, as I said, you would have to probably train against specific purchase orders, in my case, invoices, SOWs, whatever you want it to be, but you'd have to train your model. I've also used Azure Document Intelligence. So if you want to go more advanced, you can do a HTTP call out to Azure and use the standard models in the Azure Document Intelligence to do this extraction. And then I've also had scenarios where I've actually used Python and AI Foundry directly. Usually, the only 2 times I've had to go the pro code route and I've hit limitations on low code is where I'm hitting more than 50 pages in documents. So I have some use cases where customers are giving me 200-page documents and I need to extract as much information and put it into a form field. That's where I'm hitting limitations with like the Power Automate prompts. It doesn't allow you to exceed 50 pages, but going out to other services does. So being aware of all the limitations, the licensing, the costing models. I know someone's asked a question around costing, analyzing the invoice. It all depends on which service you're using. Copilot have changed to sort of message consumption. There's different messages packages depending on your licensing. So to answer that question, you need a degree in licensing or even cost analysis. There are some good cost analysis tools out there. So I will dig out a link and share that with you. But overall, that's my demo. I wanted to keep it brief and quick to allow any time for questions. But hopefully that was well received. So Q&A time.
Thanks, Charlie. Do you have any idea at all how much money it would cost for just that one invoice? Just roughly.
Not the one invoice, but I can say that I've done a scenario where we were transacting 10,000 invoices, and it was about £300 a month for 10,000 invoices. So that should give you some kind of indication. But that was based on the licensing that they already had, so we could utilize some of the message consumptions, and it was some top-ups. So, I can't give you a cost per file just because in some cases it could be free depending on the licensing that you got. For example, you get some really good message consumptions with dynamic licensing. But if you don't have dynamic licenses, then it's additional licenses. You get some with Copilot M365 licensing. So, Giles, it's very complex.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. Yeah, it's good to have that kind of ballpark figure from what you said. Thanks.
Yeah. But if you think, what I always say to the customer is, and we can try and help them with this, and I think there are ROI calculators coming or already there. I need to double check if it's in preview in the admin center, especially under the Copilot, because ultimately, let's say it costs £300 for 10K invoices. As Franco said, that's a no-brainer. It's going to cost you more than that in hiring someone to input that data, and you can speed up the review. So where I'm seeing this very useful is like insurance industries, underwriters. They have to extract all this information out of big insurance policies. Well, let's use AI to do that, but then let them be this, what they're trained to do and review as an underwriter. Am I okay with that? Am I happy? Am I liable to sign up to that? Yes. If not, then I do something about it. So I see this really progressing in sort of insurance brokers, etc. That's where I'm seeing a lot of traction.
Sounds great.
You showed that kind of prompt area in Power Automate. Does that mean other people can see prompts have been pre-written? And if so, can you see what flows are using that prompt so you don't accidentally edit something where someone else is using the same prompt?
The prompts are still controlled by environment. So I still add my prompts to my solutions, and it's still part of the standard ALM strategy that you'd have with Power Platform. So if I go into another environment, I won't see that prompt.
But if I was in your environment, I was writing another process, and I want to do the same thing, would I be able to say, hold a second, that somebody's already written a prompt that gets that stuff for me, so I could just reuse
exactly
prompts.
That. Yeah.
So it's all about naming conventions at that point.
Yeah, you do need to consider that, which I hadn't in this case, but it's a good point you raised because it's at environment level.
So just looking at mine, I've got 15, all of which are called custom prompt, date and time.
Yeah, not ideal. As you can see, I only had two. I only have two prompts that I've made, but I've kind of named them, right? Purchase order extraction or extract insurance information. So trying to think of naming conventions and probably putting some naming conventions in your business would be a good idea. Probably something I'll take away and take forward actually based on that question. So yeah, really appreciate that, James.
Yeah, it makes me think of all the governance around it as well. Like it has you as the owner, and how do you change that? What can people see? What can they change?
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. And, I love the comment. I was just reading the comment, in a world where it's all about low code is dead and Gen AI will take over in a session about talking about both. That's kind of why I wanted to do this session because, I'm very much AI-driven development. I do think that we should be moving towards that, but I don't think that AI will replace developers in the short term. But then 8-9 years ago when I started Power Apps, if I thought Power Apps would be where it was now, I probably would have laughed at you. So it's just how tech is moving.
I think for me, it's the same as.
Josh touched on the. Sorry, James. No, I just wanted to add that obviously Josh touched on that on his session as well, that obviously we're going to start using more and more AI to generate the apps, but we will still, need that human touch as well to it. So I don't think, overnight we're going to give up.
Yeah. For me, it's the same as I remember Power Effects came out. You get them to write your Power Effects stuff. It was all right, it worked, but it wasn't optimized. You could always make it better. DAX, the same DAX quick measures. If you know what you're talking about, you can make it much more efficient. And I think the same with prompts. So when you get Copilot to write your prompt, it's okay, it'll do the job. But if you start eating a lot of messages, you might have people inside the organization who go and say, I'm going to go and look at your prompt and optimize it. It's eating through too many messages. It's just not efficient enough. And I think that'll be what the differentiation is. It's people like us going in and optimizing stuff that Copilot has got you there, but not very well.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to bring up the slides and just go on to our closing notes. So next month's call is actually to be determined at the moment. So we already have our plans. It's going to be our kind of Christmas special like we did last year. And it's going to be like Australia, New Zealand, that kind of vibe to it. But yeah, we'll come out with more details on that soon. Is that right, Anya?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. Yeah.
So speakers from down under as the last year.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be posting on LinkedIn about that in due course. Thank you so much to the speakers today. That was really great and interesting, and lots of things to take away and think about with that. And we'll put the recording on YouTube within 24 hours, most likely. We've got our links there, and we can also provide them in the chat. And I also wanted to say thank you to the people from High Five who are here right now, as well as they're going to be live in around about an hour's time. So yeah, go and have an hour's break and then come back and join them. And maybe they can put a link in the chat for the event. If not, you can find it all over LinkedIn.